Greetings to grade 12 candidates. My name is Mr. Mhlongo. I'm back here with you today again. We continue with the economics. So today we're moving on to the next topic. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono and Phakama Research Development. Please join me. Let's continue with the journey of today. So today we are moving on to the business cycles. Remember last week we were together, last week Friday, we covered the circular flow from first subtopic to the last one, which is the multiplier. And then today we march on again to the second topic of your grade 12 content, which is topic number 2 under macroeconomics. The topic is business cycles. But then on this lesson, we won't cover everything under business cycle because it's a longer topic, but we'll cover until government policies. I'm Mr. Mhlongo. Please join me and see what I have for you in the pocket. These are the lesson objectives that will be achieved during the course of this lesson. This lesson will improve your understanding in the following aspects of the business cycle, namely the composition of the business cycle. This is where we will be able to see how is it composed, the characteristics of the business cycle, the diagram for the business cycle. Number 2, the difference between typical and actual business cycle. It will give you a clear view on how you can really separate the typical business cycle and the actual business cycle. And then also the features of the business cycle. You will know different periods of the business cycle that are the part of its characteristics. Reasons for the business cycle. It will also equip you to understand further the reasons for the business cycle, where we talk about endogenous and exogenous reasons. And then the government policy. This is where we will be elaborating more on how can the government intervene to smooth the business cycle in case the economy is at either peak or prosperity, or maybe if the economy is at trough or depression, or if it's faced by contraction period. So the following indicates to you the layout of your your examination based on the business cycle. So this is a DBE, Department of Basic Education 2021 Economics Examination Guidelines, for which I think you have them, or if not, you will have to be familiar with them, because examiners normally follow this structure to ensure that they set up the quality question papers. So this is only based on business cycle. We are not covering the whole exam guideline because it's about 32 pages. We'll only cover the exam guideline per topic. Today we are on the business cycle, so I will talk about the exam guideline that is focusing on the business cycle. So here we go. Under this topic, which is topic number 2, remember it's a part of macroeconomics, which is our paper 1. And then macroeconomics is for your examination. I think more information will be given to you when we go for maybe June exam and preparatory exam, because that's when now we'll be having paper 1 and paper 2. For now, term 1 is our what we call March control test, as well as SPA for term 1. The business cycle. So it is very important for you to understand the structure that we call examination guideline, because it gives you the layout and how you should prepare yourself for the final examination, or even preparatory or June examination. So analysis and explanation of business cycles and how they are used in forecasting. So the focus, relevant concept, composition, explanation, government policies, new economic paradigm, and features underpinning forecasting in respect of South African conditions. Then briefly describe the concept. So the first thing, for 2.1, the composition and the features of the business cycle. It is very important for you to ensure that you capture the following. Be able to define the concept, or describe the concept of the business cycle as the economic model that illustrates the increase and decrease of economic activities, what we call also the upswings and downswings, expansion and contraction, etc. And then briefly explain the nature of the business cycles. And then you continue to demonstrate or illustrate the typical business cycle. So you must be able to draw or illustrate the typical business cycle, which is the normal one that you learned from grade 10. And then use the diagram and briefly discuss different phases in the business cycle. It is also important for you to be able to draw the diagram and explain phases of the business cycle. You have to know where does recession fit under business cycle? Where does depression fit under business cycle? Where does recovery fit? And where does prosperity fit? Also, it is important for you to know both the turning points, namely the top turning point, which is peak, and the bottom one, which is trough. So you must be able to use diagram to give that explanation. And then also broadly outline real business cycle. It is important also for you to be able to explain or describe or briefly discuss what we call the real or the actual business cycle. That's when now you will be able to give the difference between the typical business cycle and the actual or real business cycle. And then in continuity, you must be able to discuss or briefly discuss exogenous or monetary explanation of the business cycle. That's when we talk about reasons for the business cycle. We have exogenous reasons, which are known as the monetarist approach. And then we also have endogenous reasons for the business cycle, which are known as the Keynesian approach or interventionist approach. You must be able to give a brief explanation or discussion on endogenous reasons for the business cycle, which are separated to be, we have the internal reasons, which are endogenous, as well as external reasons, which are exogenous reasons. So be able to briefly discuss them so that we will be able to answer in case you come across such questions in your SPA that is coming, as well as the March examination for now. And then also compare both explanations. So be able to compare and contrast both endogenous explanation as well as exogenous explanation for the business cycle. It will be covered on this lesson. And then as we continue, give broad outline on types of business cycles. Namely, we have kitchen, juggler, goosenet, and contractive. As much as we have 7 of them that include what we call the political business cycle, demand-driven business cycle, as well as the supply-driven business cycle. But the main ones, we have these 4, which include the kitchen, the juggler, the goosenet, and contractive. It is also important for you that as you explain these types of the business cycle, you are also able to provide the nature of investment that that business cycle can accommodate, and also the duration that business cycle can take to be a full cycle, because that's how we explain it even on this lesson. And then we continue. Explain the composition of the following policy. That's when now we talk about the government policy. So that's when now we will be elaborating more to you on the fiscal policy. What is meant by the fiscal policy? Which are the basic instruments of the fiscal policy? Who is responsible for fiscal policy in South Africa? Same thing will apply when we'll be talking about the what we call the monetary policy. Remember, we also have the monetary policy. Then it is important for you to capture the following. What is meant by the monetary policy? Who controls monetary policy in South Africa as per institution? And then who's the governor of that particular institution? And then which team is responsible to monitor possible changes in inflation rate and possible changes in the monetary policy instruments? That is called the MPC, or Monetary Policy Committee. So it is important for you also to be able to go through that and understand. So that's when now we'll be talking about under monetary policy, repo rate or repurchase rate, which is regarded as the interest rate that is charged by a reserve bank to commercial banks on their borrowings. Then also open market transaction, which is concerned with the sale or the purchase of government bonds or financial securities or shares or paper assets, which is a transaction that occurs between South African Reserve Bank in South Africa and the commercial banks. Also, you must be able to explain how the cash reserve requirement or reserve requirement ratio is used to deal with the economy, either at the upswing or downswing, or at the peak or trough, or during when it's overheating, or when the economy is underperforming. So remember, cash reserve refers to the ratio on revenue that commercial banks must hold on to. They must not dispose it into the circulation to prevent high level of money supply, also to protect or to safeguard the future uncertainty that can occur in the banking sector in South Africa. And then also the moral persuasion, that's what we call moral suasion or moral persuasion. That is called moral pressure. That's when now Reserve Bank intervenes to give instructions to commercial banks to behave in a manner that is highly desirable based on the prevailing economic conditions. Why do that happen? That happens to ensure that people are not given credit where there is no need for credit to be created, because should there be more credit created while the economy is at peak, that can lead to what? That can lead to inflation and also high level of import of imports due to the fact that there will be more money chasing few goods. So should people demand goods that are not available in the domestic economy, they will import them, which will be increasing imports more than exports, and that is bad for the economy. So our lesson goes up to these policies, but further explanation that will also be repeated next week. The new economic paradigm, you need to know this one. It's an essay where you discuss in detail the new economic paradigm, explain the smoothing business cycle. So be aware, once your teacher gives you this exam guideline, wherever it's written discuss in detail, that means that's an essay type question. So you must be aware that you must answer in detail, and there's a higher order response that is required in there if you will respond to this kind of the question. This 2.4, it's an essay under business cycle. The examiner can ask you to discuss in detail new economic paradigm or discuss in detail smoothing business cycle. That's when we discuss both the demand side policies and supply side policies. What is good about the demand side policies? It is the fact that what will be discussed today on government policies, where we talk about the fiscal policy and the monetary policy, that component is covered. It's a part of demand side because it influences the changes in demand in the economy. Should we influence fiscal policy, there will be a change in demand. Should we influence monetary policy, there will also be a change in demand. It depends where the economy is situated, but that will be discussed further during this lesson. So the advantage that we will get here is that the policies that have been discussed will also come back as an essay under demand side. However, there's an addition of inflation and unemployment, explaining it using what we call the Phillips curve, and also changes in demand when you are shifting the what we call demand side policies only. And then we move still on the paradigm, the supply side policies. That's when we talk about factors that can be used by the government to influence aggregate supply in the economy. Remember, it is very important for the government whenever it intervenes that it influences both the demand and supply, so that if ever they happen to influence the demand, remember what can happen. Influencing the demand alone without the supply, that can lead to more money available in the economy, or more money supply. That's when there will be more money chasing few goods in the economy. But if the state intervened by influencing both demand side policies and supply side policies, then these equilibriums will be corrected in there, because the demand might be able to match the supply, or the supply might be able to match the demand. That's why there is a merge of two policies, which is demand side and supply side policies. In there, we talk about the likes of the cost of doing the business, whereby we say it is important for the state to intervene by assisting the businesses to reduce the cost of doing the business, so that business can be able to produce more goods at the lower cost per unit. So components will be discussed in there on our next week lesson. Also, improving efficiency of input. That's whereby we refer to this situation like having to ensure that local firms are able to adapt to the new technology in the economy, so that they will always be productive. So whenever there's a new technology, they must invest into it, they must not delay, so that they will be able to produce more goods and services. Also, it also talks to the fact that taxation, once the government intervened by influencing taxes or increasing taxes, that becomes a disincentive in the economy. So it is important for the state to ensure that taxes are not increasing aggressively, so that people can be motivated to work, firms can be motivated to invest. So that's also a part of it. Also, free advisory services. That's when we talk about the state intervening to support local businesses, especially exporting businesses, by giving them some benefits so that they will be able to produce more goods for the local and the global or foreign market. And then we talk about improving efficiency of market. In this situation, we are referring to the fact that in the market, it is very important that there is no much government intervention, because if ever in the market government intervene the most of investors withdraw, because they don't want to invest in the economy where there is too much government intervention. For instance, in South Africa, there is too much government intervention in our economy, and that leads to investors becoming pessimistic about investing in South African economy. So we talk about the regulation, whereby there should be removal of unnecessary laws and regulations or rules by the government, so that markets can be able to function easily without being disturbed. So also we talk about the likes of improving what we call a competition. If ever there is a factor that are promoting competition in the economy, there will be more businesses in the economy that will be able to settle in South Africa and invest, which will be increasing the competition. So how is that done? That can be done by ensuring that there is fair competition within the market, meaning we should promote healthy competition by using Competition Policy Act of South Africa. That's when also we we go further to talk about the leveling of playing field, whereby we avoid public sector or SOEs to compete with the private sector entities, because SOEs receive ongoing financial support from the government, while private sector do not receive any financial support from the state. So it is unfair for them to compete with one another. And then also, we must be able to draw the graph now where we combine both the demand side and supply side. That's when now we draw one graph, and then on the graph, we are shifting simultaneously the demand, the aggregate demand, and also aggregate supply. If ever there's an increase in aggregate demand, there must also be an increase in aggregate supply so that there will be no inflation effect. So we'll also be talking about that graphically, so that we can see that if ever the state intervened by using both the simultaneous demand and supply side policies, there will be no inflation effect in the economy. Prices will remain constant, but the quantity demanded and supplied will increase at the same ratio, which prevents inflation. After that, we'll be dealing with the features underpinning forecasting. In this situation, we'll be discussing the likes of indicators, 4 of them, plus other features, which include the likes of leading indicators, lagging indicators, coincidence, as well as composite indicators. Then we go further to discuss the likes of extrapolation, moving averages, trend line, the length of the business cycle, as well as the extrapolations. So it is important for you to know those. Also, be aware. Here again, we say discuss in detail. That means this will be an essay question. So once it says on your exam guideline, discuss in detail, that means it's an essay. So after this lesson, if you have not seen exam guideline or you have never heard about it, ensure that you contact your teacher or you see your teacher, you request the examination guideline copy per topic so that you can be able to be in line with the requirements of NSC examination. So the following are terminologies that will assist you to understand this lesson. Firstly, we talk about the monetary policy. So remember, the monetary policy is controlled by South African Reserve Bank in South Africa. So this is the policy by Central Bank, which is administered by the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC. So in this situation now, you will learn about the new MPC. Last week, you learned about MPC as a part of marginally promised to consume. But today, we are learning about the Monetary Policy Committee that will be discussed further in detail here, which is the group of people that are selected by the Governor of the Reserve Bank to monitor the possible changes in what we call in the inflation rate so that they can influence the interest rate and other monetary policy measures. So those people consist of there's a group of the group of 7 people that include the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. Lesotho Kganyago, and then his 3 governors, his 3 deputies, as well as 3 executive members. So what is the duty of monetary policy? Is to influence changes in money supply in the economy so that there will be price stability. What do we mean by price stability? If we talk about the price stability, we don't mean that prices remain constant. We mean prices, as much as they change, they don't change over time. They don't become volatile. And then economic boom, the successive period of business cycle characterized by peak and prosperity. And then depression, the long-term decline in economic activities that is more severe than the recession. And then also the peak, the highest turning point of the business cycle, which indicate the end of expansion period and the beginning of the contraction period. We continue with the terminologies. Contraction period, the period that illustrates decline in economic indexes characterized by recession and depression. That is known as a downswing. In your business cycle, whenever you see the downswing, we call that one a contraction period. Expansion period, the period of business cycle that illustrates the increase in economic activities characterized by recovery and prosperity. That's our upswing on the business side. We call that one an expansion period. And then a repurchase rate or repo rate, the interest rate charged by central bank to commercial banks on their borrowings. In this case, we refer to the situation whenever commercial bank needs money, they borrow money from South African Reserve Bank in South Africa. And then remember, the borrowed money from central bank must be paid for the interest rate. What do we call those interest rates? We call them what we call a repo rate or repurchase rate or the lending rate. The trough. So I think the trough is a repetition in this situation. The cash reserves. This is the ratio in a form of commercial banks' revenues that they are obliged to keep into the central bank. In other definition, we can say cash reserves or reserve requirement ratio is the ratio on revenue that commercial banks must hold on to. Why do we have such? the commercial banks must hold to what we call the a certain reserve, which in South Africa currently is 2.5%, to prevent to have more money supply in the economy, to prevent high level of inflation, also to safeguard the future uncertainty that can occur in the banking system. Remember, it happens that we come across the issue of the bank failure. When the bank collapses, depositors must get back their money. So if ever there is no money that is on the reserves, the bank cannot be able to pay back depositors' money or investors' money. So it is important for the Reserve Bank to ensure that there are cash reserves that are kept on each commercial banks, so that in case of those challenges that we call uncertainties, the Reserve Bank can intervene to take that money and pay depositors their money. Because should they fail to pay depositors their money, the confidence on banking sector will be lost, and people will not be banking their money in the banking system in South Africa. Remember the bank failure that you covered in grade 11. Moral suasion. This is the manner in which commercial banks should behave when creating credit, which is informed by the current economic conditions. Remember, like I've mentioned before, that central bank or reserve bank is responsible to give instructions to commercial banks to behave in a manner that is acceptable or most desirable based on the prevailing economic conditions. So we call that instrument the moral persuasion or moral suasion. It exists because Reserve Bank is fully aware that people are always tempted to spend. They spend money they don't even have. So should there be more credit created even when it's unnecessary, people will be spending, which will be putting more pressure on inflation and on imported goods and services, which is bad for the economy. Open market transaction. This is all about the sale or the purchase of bonds that occur between the commercial banks and the central bank. So if ever the central bank wants to decrease money supply in South African economy, what does it do? It simply intervenes by selling bonds to commercial banks. So before we go further, listen. South African assets, or assets that are owned by the government, in other words, are controlled by who? By South African Reserve Bank. The South African Reserve Bank take a part to ensure that if the government needs to sell, it sells on its behalf. Therefore, those are the bonds we are talking about. Those are the shares or financial securities or paper assets that we are talking about under open market transaction. So those shares are sold in the open market, which is the transaction that takes place between the South African Reserve Bank and commercial banks. So should the South African Reserve Bank be willing to collect money from the circulation as maybe the economy is at peak, it comes in and sell bonds or shares to whom? To commercial banks. As commercial banks are buying these shares, they remain with less money. If they remain with less money, that will simply be resulting to less credit creation in the economy. Remember, commercial banks function in one main objective. They sell money to create money. How do they sell money? Whenever they give people loans, that simply means they will be attaching or adding interest on those loans so that they will be making an extra money on the loan that they've been given out. That's how they make even extra money. They sell money to create money. So for that reason, the Reserve Bank will always intervene to ensure that it reduces money supply from the banking system, because that's where we access money as businesses and households in the economy. We get money from the banking sector. Should the money be reduced from banks, there will be less money supply in the economy. What is money supply? Money supply is the circulation of money in the economy, is the quantity of money available in the economy. That's money supply. So if ever the Reserve Bank wants to increase the money supply, maybe the economy is at depression or trap or faced by contraction period, central bank must intervene by buying bonds or government bonds from who? From the commercial banks. So Reserve Bank comes in and buy those shares from commercial banks. As it buys shares, the money is given back into the circulation, because money in the Reserve Bank is not available in circulation, but money within the banking system, like in commercial banks, that money is available in the within the circulation. Therefore, people can be able to acquire and get some credits from commercial banks. And then continuity, the vault cash or vault money. In this situation, we are referring to money that is available but it cannot be spent. For instance, if the Reserve Bank intervened by increasing reserve requirement ratio or cash reserves requirement, that simply means money supply will be decreasing, but the vault cash or vault money will be increasing, because that means more money is kept on reserves, which cannot be used anytime. So as money supply decreases, the vault money will be increasing on the reserve. As money supply increases, vault money will be decreasing on reserves. In case maybe the South African Reserve Bank is influencing the cash reserves requirement or reserve requirement ratio. So this is the body of our lesson. First, we will be talking about the composition of the business cycle. Then we'll talk about features of the business cycle. Then we'll talk about types of business cycle. We'll talk about reasons for business cycle. Then we'll end it by the government policies, in which we'll be discussing in detail the monetary policy instruments as well as the fiscal policy instruments. All the best for this lesson. So here we are starting by illustrating to you the typical business cycle. Remember, note the following. The typical business cycle refers to the business cycle that is characterized by smooth waves. It is characterized by smooth waves. Unlike the actual business cycle that will be discussed along the lesson, which is characterized by the jagged waves. You will see the normal business cycle that we have been seeing all along is known as a typical business cycle. So we know that on our vertical axis we have index of economic activities, and then horizontal we have the time or period or duration. And then everything there begins at zero, but be aware that there is no country with the economy at zero. That's why our trend line doesn't begin here at zero. It starts somewhere, because every country has something available in terms of economic activities. So this is the trend line, which is the line that shows where the economy is heading or the direction of economic activities. So now you can see these are the way the upswings and downswings of economic activities, which is regarded to be a business cycle. The expansion and the contraction, the increase and decrease of economic activities. So we will be explaining to you all of these phases, the periods, turning points, etc. Then we have peak. Remember, peak is our highest turning point of the business cycle that indicates the end of expansion and the beginning of contraction. That's our peak. Remember, at peak, we have a situation whereby economy is doing extremely well. There is the highest level of economic activities with more money available, and that money is chasing few goods. Why we say the money is chasing few goods and services while firms are also producing? At this point of peak, be aware of the fact that firms have exhausted all of their factors of production, only to find that they are unable to satisfy the local market or domestic market with goods and services they demand. For that sake, that's why local consumers end up importing some goods and services from other countries, because they have more money while there are less goods available in South African economy. Also, in this situation or this point of peak, we have a situation of more demand than the supply. So consumers are demanding more. Oh, that means aggregate demand increases faster than aggregate supply, which causes the demand pull inflation. That's why we say at that point of peak of prosperity, we say the economy is hot, meaning it's overheating. So it must be cooled down, because should we experience the further expansion, that will lead to people that are underprivileged suffering from inflation, which is bad for some stakeholders of the economy. From then, once the economy downturn, after 6 months, so if the economy consecutively declined for the period of 2 quarters or 6 months, that means the economy will be facing recession. That's a recession which is defined as the consecutive decline of economic activities for the period of 6 months. When the economy decreases for 6 months consecutively, we call that recession. So in other words, we say the decrease in economic activities for 2 consecutive quarters. What is meant by the quarter? A quarter means the period of 3 months. So our quarter is 3 months, and then another quarter is 3 months. So if ever it's 6 months consecutively, we call that 2 consecutive quarters, or the period of 6 months. Be aware of the following information. Currently now in South Africa, we are still on the 2024, on the 2023-2024 or 2024-2025, what do you call financial year. 2024-2025 financial year. We have not yet ended our year financially in South Africa. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because our financial year is yet to end. It will be ending on the last, at the end of what? At the end of March, 31st of March, and the new year financially will begin on the 1st of April. I'm not talking about Happy New Year for crickets here. I'm talking about South African financial year. It ends on the 31st of March and begins on the 1st of April every year. So be aware of that. Our first quarter will be starting on the 1st of April, and then our year will end next year on the 31st of March. That's why we'll be saying on our upcoming budget speech, we'll be saying this budget is for 2025, 2026, because it starts in 2025 and overlaps to 2026, where we will be ending the year. Currently, we are ending our fourth quarter of 2024-2025 financial year. So this is recession, and then if ever the economy continues to decrease as for the long term, then we come across a depression. That's when now the situation becomes even severe. And then from then we'll approach the trough. That's when now we talk about the lowest or bottom turning point of the business cycle, which is characterized by poor level of economic activities, where there's totally less money supply in the economy. And then our firms in there are underusing factors of production. People are unemployed. Firms are shutting down. Investors have left the country because they are pessimistic about investing in the country's economy. There's a lower level of productivity in the country in there. And then in case the state intervenes, maybe with a fiscal policy or the monetary policy, that's when now the economy can recover. But then let's see, we have this arrow that is pointing downward in there. That arrow is showing us what we call the amplitude, the downward or decreasing amplitude. So it will be indicated. Then I see recovery coming here, and then remember, we call recovery the positive rebound in economic activities. That's when now things start to be positive in the economy. We come across businesses investing back in the economy, production increases, GDP increases, and then we come across the employment opportunities being created. We come across firms importing machines so that they can be able to produce goods. We come across new firms being registered in the economy. And then under prosperity, that's when we have successive growth of the economic activities. Everything is well in there, even though we have inflation rate being at the highest level under demand pull inflation, because still here we have more money chasing few goods, which can lead to inflation. And then you can see the distance between peak and peak. Remember, there is peak behind this prosperity, or peak to prosperity, or peak to peak. We call this one the length, because this is the period or duration that will be taken by the cycle to be the full cycle. You will see it start from this point to this point. We say that's a length. Remember, down there we said time or period, which indicates the duration that can be taken by the cycle to be the complete business cycle. And then also down there, from trough to trough, we also have length. If ever they say describe the concept length, be aware that we are talking about the distance, from peak to peak, or peak to prosperity, and trough to trough. That's our length of the business cycle. That is duration taken by the cycle to be the full cycle. And then let's see, the amplitude is indicated. Yes, amplitude under contraction period. From peak going down there until trough, we call this one a contraction period. That's a downswing, meaning our economy is contracting, it's going down, it's decreasing. So we call this one the amplitude. So amplitude measures the distance from peak trend line up to trough. And then we have a downward amplitude and the upward amplitude. This upswing you see in green in there, it's indicating to us what we call the upward amplitude, which shows the positive trends of economic activities. There you see amplitude expansion period. So this upswing, which is green there, is indicating the possible variables or the possible growth of economic activities. And then features of the business cycle. How do we see the business cycle? Let's see, we have contractionary period, or the contraction period, where in there we have recession and depression. Remember, on recession, we said it's a decline of economic activities for the period of 6 months or 2 consecutive quarters. And then depression is a long-term decline in economic activities, which is severe than recession. It's worse than what happens in recession. Then on expansion period, we have recovery and prosperity. Under recovery, we talk about the positive rebound of economic activities, while prosperity, we talk about successive growth of economic activities, where all factors of production have been utilized. So here we are explaining all phases of the business cycle. Remember, on the exam guideline, it was indicated that you must be able to explain phases of the business cycle uses the business cycle diagram. So, like I've been doing, drawing the business cycle, indicating phases. That is very important for you. Now, you need to know what happens under recession based on economic activities. So that's our definition. A recession refers to the decline in the level of economic output that lasts for 2 consecutive quarters or the period of 6 months. You need to know from today that if we talk about the quarter, we talk about the period of 3 months. So if it's 2 consecutive quarters, we mean the economy has declined for 6 months consistently. So the period of recession begins after economy has reached peak. It is the first part of the contraction period. Once we move from peak, the economy starts to go down. Once it declines for the period of 6 months consecutively, we can say the economy is at recession. There is a decrease in aggregate demand. So why we have a decrease in the demand for goods and services, or aggregate demand as a whole under recession? It is because when you face recession, that means people are unemployed. Firms are underusing factors of production, which means the labor will be underused. Other factors of production will not be used efficiently. And then people will be unemployed, meaning they will be losing their jobs. There will be less disposable income available in the economy. Then remember, if we don't have money, we demand less, or we don't demand on goods and services. And then business confidence decreases, businesses produce and invest less. So if ever economy is at recession, investors find it difficult to invest in that particular economy because they are not aware if the situation will go worse or it will be better in future. So they don't want to invest in the economy that is already declining because they cannot guarantee their future profits or future gains. For that reason, they invest less. And then manufacturing production falls rapidly as fewer goods and services are produced. Obviously, firms will be producing less because there will be less investors in the economy. This results to decrease in GDP and economic growth. Obviously, once there is less productivity due to the fact that there have been less consumption spending by the household in the economy, that will mean now the GDP of the country will be decreasing. Also, economic growth will decrease. We continue with recession phase. There is a depreciation of the value of the currency. Our currency starts to lose its value, meaning it becomes weak when it compared to other currencies of other countries. Demand pull inflation decreases caused by less money supply and aggregate demand. Remember, once the economy starts to downturn or decrease or slow down from prosperity or from peak going down, that means now our economic activities are declining. In that situation, there is no longer more money chasing few goods because people are unemployed with then less disposable income. For that reason, we will have less demand pull inflation, and also the level of imports will start to decrease because our local consumers are no longer having more money because money supply has been decreased. Businesses cut back on their employment of production factors, which increases unemployment. It's been mentioned before. This causes the income of the household to decrease, leading to a decrease in consumer spending. Obviously, once people are unemployed, there will be less disposable income available in the economy. For that sake, then the consumption spending will be decreasing in the economy. But further, the demand for credit starts to decrease because of high level of unemployment. Once people are unemployed, they don't have any source of income. For that reason, they cannot borrow money from commercial banks. They can only borrow if they are employed. For that reason, then we say the demand for credit will start to decline due to the fact that people are not employed. Poverty levels increase, which calls for government intervention to redistribute income and wealth. Remember, once people start to be unemployed, some of them will find themselves under absolute poverty, meaning they won't even be having the minimum income for basic living. For that reason, people will find themselves under absolute poverty. And then what is going to happen? Poverty will be too high. That will be calling for the government to intervene by redistributing income and wealth through maybe social transfers, providing some public goods and services, providing some social wages, etc. Then we move to depression phase, which is worse than recession. Now let's check. Depression refers to the sustained or long-term decrease or downturn in economic activities in the business cycle that is more severe than recession. So be aware of the following. What happens under depression is worse than what happened in recession. So if we said under recession, people will be retrenched, that simply means under depression, firms will be shutting down. So you can see the difference. We retrench workers, but we continue as a firm to operate. But under depression, the firm itself is shutting down or exiting the market. That simply means now the situation is even worse than before. The period of depression is a further contraction of economic activity. That means they decrease even further for the long term. So we say business confidence is very low. So we call this one the stage of pessimism. So as for your grade 10, you were told that the depression phase is the stage of pessimism because investors become pessimistic about investing in the country's economy. If you are pessimistic, you are not interested. Your interest is very low. Your confidence is very low about investing in the country's economy. So for that sake, there will be very few or no investors flowing into the country to invest because they will have no gains in the economy due to the fact that there is absolutely less money supply in the economy, less employment, factors of production are underutilized, firms are shutting down, and then even what we call the Reserve Bank is lowering interest rates so that it can attract credit creation in the economy. Investment by business decrease, disinvestment occurs. So in this case, investors withdraw their investments from the country because they can see that they are not standing for any profit or gain in the country's economy. So they withdraw their investment, which is called disinvestment. There is a low demand for credit since there is high level of unemployment and retrenchment. Remember, firms are shutting down in this situation, so there is no way that people will be demanding a high level of credit because they are unemployed. So people afford less credit, even though they are lower interest rate as for the Reserve Bank to try to create more credit in the economy. Interest rates are lower to encourage spending in the economy. However, people that are unemployed, for that reason, it will be difficult for them to access loans and spend more in the economy. Business may shut down as the economy becomes more volatile or vulnerable for investment. Remember, under depression, the economy becomes more vulnerable in a way that very few or no investors will be keen or interested to invest in the country's economy. Then we check recovery phase. That's when now we have a positive rebound in economic activities. So recovery is a positive rebound in economic activities. We have seen recovery just up there when after trough, when the economy starts to go up slightly, then we say we have recovery. Be aware, whatever you know about recession is opposite to what you know about recovery. So if you understand recession, you must understand the recovery because they oppose each other. That's the best way to understand these phases. The period of recovery begins after economy has reached trough. It is the first phase of the upswing or expansion period. So the initial phase after when we start upswing, after that trough turning point, remember we said trough is the end of contraction and the beginning of expansion. As we start to move up on the business cycle, we come across the recovery phase in there. The economy regains strength, leading to an increase in economic activities as more goods and services are produced. So once the economy starts to positively go up, it can be because of the state intervention through the use of fiscal policy and monetary policy, where the economy, when the government and the central bank are implementing expansionary policies. So that can lead to even more money supply available in the economy. For instance, how can we simply recover? That means the government must intervene by implementing expansionary fiscal policy by decreasing taxation and increasing the government spending. By doing so, if you decrease government spending, if you decrease taxation, we are giving more money into the pocket of the consumer to spend more. Remember, as consumers are having more money, they are always tempted to spend. So also, if ever you increase government spending from trough there, that means there will be more money injected into the economy, which will be increasing money flow in the economy. Jobs will be created, people will be employed, more income will be earned, and there will be more disposable income and more demand for goods and services. Remember the power of consumption or spending. Once people start to demand more, they are encouraging firms to overutilize factors of production, which will lead to further productivity in the economy, more GDP and more economic growth. So the consumption is very important. That's why we talk about this implementation of both the fiscal policy and monetary policy to influence the aggregate demand. The central bank can also intervene by maybe lowering the repo rate when we are faced by trough. By doing so, it will lead to credit becoming more cheap and affordable in the economy. Then people will be able to access credit and demand more goods and services. Central bank can intervene by lowering the cash reserve requirement, which will allow commercial banks to have more money available to use. That will be decreasing the vault money in the economy or vault cash. That